Um, hey, trying to learn this new camera. It's another nice night out tonight. The sun's going down and everybody's out mowing and taking care of the lawns, and maybe I should have chose a different time. It's kind of this video that we're going to be doing now is on Jesse James. I first saw when I was at the Moon Lake gathering. There was some books being sold there by Dan Lowe, and one of them was called The Black Book. Jesse James was one of his names, and I thought that's kind of interesting. And so I was talking with Dan about it, and he's pretty interested in Jesse James as well. So I asked him if I could come up and interview him, and that's what we did. We sat down at Moon Lake Lodge. Greg was nice enough to let us use his back room, and now of course I got an airplane flying over. So we started doing an interview with some of the questions I started reading the book, this Black Book, and I had a lot of questions, and so I formulated the questions into where we can make a good video out of it. I think you'll find it very interesting, this book. I'll just have to find a good place to stop it and start it for the next segment. I hope you enjoy it as much as I enjoyed making it. In that case, have fun. We're here at Mountain Home, Utah. I thought it would be a good place to do this recording about this one will be about Jesse James. When we were at the Moon Lake gathering, I saw a book that Dan was selling that he had redone for everybody to buy, and it was a book on Jesse James, and it's called The Black Book. So Dan wanted to do a video about, you know, the different things that happened to Jesse James and possibly aliases that he went by, and did he really get killed in 1842? Is that right? Was it 1842 that?
1882 is when he supposedly was shot.
In that time that he would have been 37, almost 38 years old, because he was born in 1842, right? Yeah.
By the way.
When I started reading the book, Dan, it was kind of, I kept reading it and I kept thinking, can this all be true? Because it seemed so out there.
Yeah.
The first thing I got to, one of the first chapters was just talking about his supposed when he died, but then it went into a story of what actually happened according to the author of that book. And that was that not Jesse James wasn't buried, it was a man named Charles Bigelow.
Right.
Can you tell us a little bit about how that came about? Because that's a whole story in itself.
First off, and make sure you kick me back into play on this, but first off, I had the same problem when I started reading it. I was asked to read it and give my objective opinion on it, and as I read through the book, I thought, wow, this is,
A lot of
some of
claims.
this stuff's hard to believe. But I try to keep an open mind in both directions. And as I went through it, with the purpose of assessing the book to try to determine whether I thought that it was factual or full of falsehoods. But the more I read it, the more I knew I had to start the research right then and there. I couldn't just read the book and then go back and then start trying picking out things to research.
Right.
I just started doing it as I went. To cut to the chase on that, I've never been able to disprove any of the claims in that book. That doesn't mean that they're true, but I haven't been able to disprove it, okay? There's been many things that I've been able to prove, or at least prove to my point of satisfaction.
Right,
okay?
it comes to a certain point that...
Right, someone else, they might say, well, that's still a little iffy, and that may be true. But there's several reasons why I draw the conclusions, and I'm going to try to cover that so that, the viewer, the listener can get a good idea where I'm coming from.
They can buy the book and have, do their own research and come to their own
Well,
conclusion.
it's like the side-by-side photos that I use, the overlays with increasing opacity. When some of those, when I look at them, I don't know how you can't tell that this person on the left isn't the same person on the right. But yet there are people out there that look at them and say, that's not the same person. That doesn't mean they're wrong.
No.
Doesn't mean I'm right. So it's more of a, you be the judge. Now, what was the question you were supposed to kick me back into?
Well, what were some of the reasons why Jesse James was murdered in the first place? I mean, if he was, why was they...
Okay, whose point of view are we going to go from? Academics, or what, according to the Black Book, says?
Well, why don't we start with academics, and then we can say what the Black Book says. We can do both.
Well, the academic point of view is that Jesse was sold out by one of his best friends. That might be kind of steep. It was one of his good friends.
Mr. Ford, right?
Yeah, and he sold him out for the reward money of $10,000, and supposedly shot him in the back of the head.
When he was straightening out a picture in his wall or something.
Standing on a chair, straightening out a picture.
Okay.
Have you ever been in that little cabin?
I haven't. Have you?
House?
Have you?
No, I haven't, but I've got plenty of photos and many people who have been there.
Okay.
If you were standing on a chair, your head would be about that far through the ceiling.
That was pretty short headroom, huh?
Why would he have to stand on a chair to straighten an image?
When he could just touch the ceiling.
Uh-huh.
Okay, so let's get into, what does the book say?
And that's, the Black Book. What the Black Book says is that...
Well, first of all, what was Mr. Ford's first name? I can't remember.
Bob Ford.
Bob Ford, and he supposedly was a childhood friend of Jesse James.
They'd known each other a long time, yeah.
And it seems kind of far-fetched that if he really truly was a friend, that he would shoot his friend.
Well, there's all kinds of little problems.
I guess money does talk.
And we'll go into those little problems. One of them is Jesse didn't need a chair to stand on to straighten a picture. And why is he going to take his gun belt off to straighten a picture? Why did Charlie Bigelow have no obvious wound on the front of his face?
So we're saying that Mr.
And
Ford shot
we've never
Jesse
really
in the back
seen
of
a
the head.
picture of the back of his head where we know there's a big gaping hole.
So you got Jesse James was shot in the head. If we're academic,
Supposedly he come up behind him and shot him in the back of the head.
and so there's no big exit wound on.
Unless we have some really good photoshoppers back then.
Well, I mean, we're assuming that the person that they said was Jesse James was Jesse James.
Yes, they're assuming that.
Yeah. But the picture that they show us does not have a big predominant exit wound from the frontal area.
Right.
Okay, so now let's skip to what the book says actually did happen.
Okay, what the book says happens, we're going to go back to when he was sitting in the local saloon or coffee shop, whatever they had back then. God, that would suck, no coffee shops.
No Starbucks.
But apparently he was sitting there with his childhood friend, Governor Crittenden, and you'd have to read parts of the book to find out how he became governor. That's important in and of itself. But while they were sitting there, another friend brought in a couple of newspapers and slapped them down in front of Crittenden and Jesse James. And it was, front page news, Jesse James strikes again. And both of them occurred in cities that were hundreds of miles from not only where they were, but from each other.
And if I remember right, Jesse was present in Crittenden's, they built, he had eyewitnesses of him.
Well, Crittenden said, my God, Jesse, he says, you couldn't have done either one of these. You were right here with me. And he says, exactly. This is why I've been telling you that Jesse James has to die.
Meaning he
needs to kill himself off.
So people don't search for him anymore.
Mm-hmm. There was too many copycat robbers out there robbing everybody and anybody, and Jesse was taking the blame for it. Now, I'm not trying to say Jesse didn't rob.
He had his own things going on.
This is what makes this so damn difficult to do. These documentaries, these interviews, is you have to understand why he was doing all these things. Jesse James was not a carefree, murdering, bloodthirsty fool, okay?
As the stories depict him as.
Right. So what was the question again?
The question was, we were talking about the difference between the academic story of Jesse James getting killed and what the Black Book says, what happened when he got killed.
Okay, all right. Okay, so I gave a little foundation on that. So Jesse decided, how he decided, whether he had help, I don't know, but they decided that Charlie Bigelow was going to be his target. And the reason for that is Charlie was one of the main individuals that was go out and commit murders and robberies in Jesse's name.
Of Jesse's name. Okay.
Right. And so they planned it and showed up and carried it out.
Okay.
Shot him out in the barn along with his two brothers, and they ended up dragging him in the house right in front of Zerelda Mims, who was never married to Jesse James. And they took the two kids in the back room, and Jesse explained to her what had happened and why it happened, and she seemed a bit distraught about it. I think it was more the fact that she didn't have a husband anymore.
That because Bigelow was her husband.
Bigelow was kind of a turd.
But he was her husband.
Right. Zerelda Mims, whom Charlie Bigelow was married to, was Jesse's cousin. Okay. So it's not like a complete stranger just burst in her door and come dragging in her husband's body.
Right. Now, right away, why did they think they could get away with this when it's a totally different base versus Jesse James? Maybe.
Well, let's destroy the mindset.
Okay.
Today we have cameras, we have internet, we have all kinds of technology where we can go and look anybody's face up. Back then, if you didn't know Jesse personally, if you wasn't a brother, a cousin, aunt, uncle, whatever, very close friend, you had no idea what he looked like.
Other than hearsay or whatever they put in the newspaper.
Mm-hmm. I don't care if you sat down and described what he looked like. You can take 10 people who are good at describing what people look like and have 10 police artists drawing pictures, and they're all going to come up with something different.
Sure. Okay, so
that's the biggest thing he had going in his favor, is no one really knew what he looked like.
So the brothers came out and they killed all three of them, Charles Bigelow and his two brothers. They buried the two brothers in the back of the barn. I think they said in a shallow grave because they knew they were going to move them again. And then they dragged Charles Bigelow's body into the house, and where
one of Jesse's men fired a couple of shots at the wall to make it look like he'd been shot there.
And then, so why you having the chair? Why stage the chair?
Huh?
The chair. Why you haven't staged the chair? Apparently, Jesse James was standing on the chair adjusting the picture.
Well, yeah. Why?
So why have the chair?
Well, if I know.
I was just wondering.
What was Jesse 4 foot nothing?
Maybe. I don't know.
Well, everything I've heard anything from 5'8" up to 5'10". Some people want to say, oh, he was 6'2".
Well, he'd be
no, he wasn't. He was probably more like 5'8".
Average height.
Huh?
Average height.
Yeah.
Okay, so we don't know why the chair was staged or whatever, but Charles Bigelow, according to the book, was staged as he was there, and then they talked to his wife, and they threatened her basically and said, this is what's going to happen. If not,
he says,
you'll be next.
Jesse told him, okay, Zerelda, get this straight because I'm only going to explain it once. He says, this is your dead husband, Jesse James. Okay, and then told her what else to do and whatever, and she just sat there and
And I believe they paid her off too.
Oh yeah, he wasn't going to leave her with nothing. This was his cousin, you know. Right. She just lost her husband at his hand. Jesse was compassionate, and
it only took
this
one
is
bullet.
the cool thing is that Zerelda Mims never stirred away from that. She always stuck to her word. And so Jesse, if she needed help throughout her years, he took care of her. And he took care of the two kids.
Yes, but I do believe that might have been changed a little bit, that she never said anything. I think Zerelda, I believe when I was reading the book, it said that there was some whisperings of what actually happened, and he was pretty adamant that he knew it was her that was doing it, and he came back and threatened her. And matter of fact, I think she was poisoned later on.
That was his aunt.
Okay, that was
Zerelda Cole James.
Not the same lady?
No, Zerelda Mims.
Oh gosh.
That's another thing. You get into duplication of a lot of names in this whole thing, and it was hard putting everything together.
All right.
And I'm not going to jump the gun.
Sorry that I interrupted you. Go ahead, keep going down.
It's okay. I forgot where I was.
Well, basically,
where are we now?
Basically, he paid her off and took care of her and the two kids.
Yeah, and the two kids knew when they got older that was not their dad. They knew it, but yet they still went to him for help if they needed financial help. When they were living in California, you know, in the 1900s. At one point, I don't know how you've got your question structured, but at one point we need to kind of talk about the various names: Jesse James, Jesse Woodson, Jesse Robert, etc., and explain why this is all so difficult to put together.
Yeah, obviously, because well, we can talk about that now. I mean, get some
the
background
academics
to it.
have got this so messed up. It's hard for me to sit down and write it to where it's understandable.
Well, maybe as we talk about each part of his life and why he took on a certain name, we can explain it then, maybe.
Okay.
So
pardon us if there is redundancy, repeating ourselves, etc.
I hope not.
Did I mention repeating ourselves?
What? So, okay, right away, what you just talked about, Jesse took on a different name, right from the get-go.
At that point.
At that point.
This is one of the things that sold me on that led to what sold me on it. In the Black Book, well, okay, academics. What did the academics say?
Well,
basically they had a funeral. threw his sorry ass in a pine box and buried him.
Well, first of all, I believe somebody that was with the state or the city came and said, that is not Jesse James.
It was the police or whatever from the next town, the sheriff.
They said,
came over, and one guy said, yeah, just a damn minute here. And he
because
says,
that finger was gone.
But first we have to introduce, okay, after they killed him, put him up against the wall, told Zerelda what was going to happen and that the police would be there. I don't think they called him police, so I think
Constable
or whatever. Guy with the badge. I was going to show up in about a half hour, and she said, you know, this is your dead husband, Jesse James. And then Aunt Zerelda showed up. You know, they actually went and got her from the next town. And he knew it was going to happen, knew it was going to go down, so he sent someone beforehand to go get her and bring her there, and he told her the same damn thing. This is your beloved nephew, Jesse James, dead on the floor. Well, she didn't pay real close attention because she told him it was her dead son. Okay?
Right.
And Jesse wanted to gut her right then and there when she said that.
Right.
And later confronted her with it. Now, see, and I went too far again.
We can back up. We can always delete.
Okay. In the Black Book, Jesse departed from the scene right after it happened for about 10-15 minutes. He had some dressing done on his shoulder, I think it was, because he got hit with a bullet.
He did in the barn.
Yeah.
It ricocheted off his badge or something, and it took part of his shoulder.
He reappeared on the scene as, quote unquote, the elegant Captain Harrison Trow. Okay. Now, the only other time that name shows up in any record is on a census report. I think back, I can't remember what year it was, but I think that's the first time that Jesse had ever used the name Harrison Trow. There is no birth record we've ever been able to find. There are no records that he ever existed.
Okay, so let's stop right there.
Okay.
Because it's my brain. After Charles Bigelow was brought in there, the two ladies were warned this is what actually happened. Jesse did not flee the scene.
No.
He actually went and
put on a disguise
and came back
as the elegant Captain Harrison Trow, sent by
the
Governor Crittenden,
right,
who was his friend.
Now maybe we should talk about Governor Crittenden right now. So
how is it that the elegant Captain Harrison Trow just happened to be in the neighborhood? Okay, and how did he receive a dispatch from Governor Crittenden in that 10-15 minutes to go and investigate?
Unless the governor was there, but
he was 250 miles away.
Yeah, so it was really good.
Perhaps he texted him, I don't know.
Anyway, so we have the Honorable
Elegant
something.
Elegant.
I'm not going to even pretend to remember.
Captain Harrison Trow showed up on the scene and took charge of the situation.
Okay, and this was actually Jesse James.
He came in about the same time the policeman from the next town over, which was a half hour away.
And that's why the policeman said, wait a minute.
Yeah, he said, wait just a damn minute. And he says, what? And he says, Jesse's index finger was injured. And Charlie Bigelow was missing a middle finger.
Right, he was missing up to there.
And he very quickly squashed that situation. And he says, have you ever met him?
This is Jesse James saying that to the constable.
Yeah, he says, well, it was Harrison Trow.
Well, I mean, okay.
Did you see why I guess?
I know, but I have to keep Jesse James. He can say who the hell he wants to say, but basically, Jesse's there saying, have you ever met me?
He says, have you ever met Jesse James? And he said, well, no. And no, he didn't even say that. He said, I bet not. He says his middle index finger was missing. And the guy shut right up, cowered down, didn't say another word after that.
This guy's from the governor's office telling him basically.
Exactly. A guy who supposedly knew Jesse James.
Right.
Later in history, it went down in history not only that he's the man that identified the body of Jesse James, but he rode with Quantrill's raiders up in Missouri prior to the Civil War, and that he was commissioned by Governor Crittenden to go and identify the body of Jesse James.
This is Tro.
Huh?
Tro. The
Yeah.
Honorable Tro.
Yeah, elegant.
Elegant something.
Elegant.
Okay, so let's talk about why the governor is supporting Tro, or Jesse James as Tro, because
Okay.
obviously there's a connection there that we're not seeing.
Well, okay, so what you want to know is why was Governor Crittenden doing this?
Well, without
Because
getting
Jesse put him up to it.
without getting in the weeds.
Right. Basically, he put him up to it because this Jesse James had become such a scar on Missouri and the robberies that were taking place. I mean, we don't want people getting scared and leaving Missouri because big bad old Jesse James is out there shooting up everybody and anyone. So Governor Crittenden and Jesse sat down and he filled him in on what he intended to do and so forth. And he gave him $75,000 to run for governor.
Because he needed cover.
Yeah,
Basically.
and if things didn't work out, possibly he needed someone to pardon him. Yeah. This is why Governor Crittenden pardoned Bob Ford so quickly, and no one ever got the $10,000 reward. Basically, they didn't have it.
Okay, we haven't talked about Bob Ford yet, so.
We just did.
Okay. So
You want to check the camera?
Yeah, we'll check the camera, but let's we'll have to remember to talk about how Bob Ford fit into this.
Make yourself a note.
It's in there somewhere. Just not in the right area.
You just make a side note, Bob.
All right, we're talking about Bob.
In different color ink even. Are you checking off your questions as you go?
No, haven't got to him yet. This is going to be probably a two-parter.
Let's start on the questions.
Well, I got to explain Bob Ford first.
Well, I'll tell you what, you explain Bob Ford because you have a better idea and concept on that than I do.
Okay, so the reason why we're bringing up Bob Ford is because in the academic, you call it that academic world, he's the one that shot Jesse.
Right.
Okay, and he was his best friend. Bob never owned a gun, right?
Never even touched one.
Okay, so
according to the Black Book.
Okay, according to the Black Book, we do so that we don't know that for sure. But supposedly, he didn't own a gun. It doesn't matter. He could have borrowed Jesse's, pulled out because Jesse didn't have his belt on. He could have used one of
Supposedly.
Jesse's. Okay. The thing that makes it kind of that I think it's something that they didn't foresee. This whole plan that we're talking about, the non-academic part of it, where Jesse obtains an alias, and setting up Crittenden as the governor of Missouri, was that Crittenden knew about, if what we know is true, he knew about the
plan to stage the hoax.
Right. So when Crittenden pardoned Bob Ford, the citizens were irate because they loved Jesse James. He was like a Robin Hood to them.
The ones that really didn't know Jesse James but loved him, yes.
Right. They assumed that Jesse James was killed, that Charles Bigelow was Jesse James, and how could he kill Jesse James? So Crittenden, the governor, pardoned Bob Ford. He became instantly, no one liked him. And therefore, he couldn't get a second term in office because I think that blowback they weren't expecting. And I think they weren't planning that. I think Jesse was hoping he would be in there for another term as well. The president wouldn't even give him a position in the cabinet or anything, just you know, because he can't be governor anymore because no one's going to vote for him. But he did end up being somebody down in Mexico. I don't know, the ambassador for Mexico, but that he ended up sending him to Mexico. So there's that's kind of the backstory, I think. So you have to look at it from both sides of the coin.
Okay.
That's what I have on Bob Ford.
Okay.
Dan?
Right.
What are some of the some of the things that made you believe that this was not was a stage hoax?
There was a lot of things, but one of the first and immediate things is, from the academic point of view, is they claim that Jesse took his guns off and laid them on the table and pushed a chair over to the wall so he could stand on it to straighten a photo. And that's when I realized that the ceiling in there, you can reach up with your hand and put your flat hand on the ceiling.
And where did you hear that from? To people that...
One of the academic views of the story. I mean, there's so many different written stories. The whole story of Jesse James has been beaten to death so many times, it's unbelievable. And everybody's right, and if you don't believe them, just ask them. But that's one of the first things that popped up. Another thing that popped up was when the Black Book says that Jesse disappeared for about 10-15 minutes and made himself up, and he returned as the elegant Captain Harrison Troe. And he went down in history as identifying the body of Jesse James. And I thought, okay, if this story's true, I should be able to find a picture of Captain Harrison Troe, and you would think that he at least looked something like Jesse James, okay? My first search, I couldn't find any photographs, okay? And this has been quite a few years ago. There's a lot more pictures online now. But before I go into that, the difficult part is nobody really knew what Jesse looked like.
That's what I was going to say.
We have the standard photos that are used to identify Jesse James, which one is he's quite young and he's wearing a hat and he's got a little bow tie, and it's one of the most common photos out there. And I kind of used it at first to gauge by.
Is it all by himself, or?
Yeah, okay. Knowing well and good it might not be him. There's another photo that popped up, and according to the source, it was found, there was a picture that you would hang on the wall found in Bottomless Lakes area, New Mexico, not far from Hereford, Texas. So, you know, maybe 100 miles.
Okay.
And in this old cabin, they found this photo hanging on the wall, and it was Frank James, Jesse James, Jesse, Frank, and their mother sitting in the middle. Now, I thought that was pretty damn cool, and it was believable. But it wasn't until years later when I found out where Captain Harrison Troe spent 25 years of his life that had more credibility, because it was, 100 miles away from this cabin. The more I looked into that photo, the more I started believing that this is Jesse James. And I did a few comparisons with the two photos that are used to portray Jesse James today from an academic standpoint, and compared them to that photo, and my conclusion was they could be him, but I don't think they are. So I started to accept the other photo even more so. That same photo, later in years, in 1946, 48, somewhere in there, after J. Frank Dalton made the announcement that I'm Jesse James, there's actually a photo of him holding that picture and looking at it and reminiscing.
this was 25 years after the supposed death of his, when he first originally died.
Yeah, that's more years than that. This is 1946, 48, somewhere in there.
Jeez, we're looking at.
But this photo was supposedly found in that cabin in roughly 1940. Okay? Well, anyway. But the next event is what made me realize that that photo is Jesse James. And that's when I was doing a search for Captain Harrison Trow, and up popped this charcoal drawing. And I looked at it, holy shit, that's Jesse James. According to this picture, that's Jesse James. And I did a lot of comparisons on them. I did point dot comparisons, where I take and I add a layer to the original photo, whichever one I'm going to overlay, and I put a dot over each eyeball, right smack dab in the middle, one on the point of the nose, one right between the lips in the middle, and one at the bottom of the chin. I used to do both sides of the head also. But there's so many things that can change that. I mean, just by turning your head a little bit, or, you know, it's not an absolute perfect science, but by doing that same thing with other photos, you couldn't get them to line up. Well, anyhow, so I did some research on this charcoal photo and found out who it was that did the charcoal drawing. And apparently she was quite famous at what she did. And off the top of my head, I can't think of her name. We'll insert a photo of her. And she apparently knew the majority of the Quantrill's Raiders because she did charcoal drawings on a majority of them. And I've come to find out that what she would do is she'd take a photo of that individual and then do the charcoal drawing.
A lot of artists now do that.
Right. So, and the way I found that out is because here's a charcoal drawing, and oh, I have that photo, and it's over here, and oh, here's this charcoal drawing, and here's the photo. But I couldn't find a photo for all of them.
Right.
I could not find a photo for Captain Harrison Trow. But the funny thing is that charcoal drawing was done at the time, if not shortly after, the elegant Captain Harrison Trow showed up on the scene.
Yeah.
It's almost as if it was intended to create evidence. So doing my overlays between the photo of Jesse James that I now am favoring,
right,
compared to Captain Harrison Trow, and doing an overlay and a point dot layer, there's no question that it's the same person, okay? You can tell that he's got his hair parted the opposite way,
and the ear,
and that cowlick's just fighting the hell out of it. And his cheeks are puffed out just a little bit more, whether that was intended or whether.
But I believe the nose and the eyes look very similar.
I wouldn't even say very similar. I'd say exact. To me, I didn't have to overlay them. I knew damn well it was the same person. Well, so that kind of sold the whole idea as to why this isn't a hoax, okay? You know, as you read through this book and you go look at the evidences that support or give credibility to the many things that is spoken of, you have to take a look at the guy who wrote the book and ask yourself, how did this guy get so damn lucky? What did he do? Spend a lifetime in a university of photos somewhere or events and whatever? How did he do that? How did he come up with such a perfect story that fits evidences that we haven't even thought to look for yet? Evidences that I didn't even look for until the last 6 years.
And the evidence is so far that I've only proved the book and not disproved it.
They're proving the book to me. So later, I find another picture of Captain Harrison Trow from about 1900, roughly. And it was when he attended one of those Civil War reunions. The soldiers, people that were in the Civil War, they had a reunion, the Confederate Union reunion. And I got to looking at that photo and comparing it to the charcoal drawing that I had found of Captain Harrison Trow. And I come to the conclusion that's absolutely the same person also. It's a known photo, accepted photo by the academics of Captain Harrison Trow. Well, I did the overlay thing on it also, but I used the picture of Jesse James, the one that I'm favoring now.
Right.
And I did an advancement. And you do this by doing point dot over the top of it, by creating a layer and put point dots in it. That way I can turn the layer off. And I match up the other photo because they just happen to be looking in the same direction. And I matched everything up, which is the first clue. If you have trouble matching it up, you might have a problem. It might not be the same person. But I didn't have any trouble with it. Then I turn that layer off, and then I increase the opacity so that the older photo shows up in over the new one. And when you go from this photo through it to the last photo, which is the older photo,
You get a transformation.
yes. And if it's not the same person, you're gonna see it. I mean, you can't make two people that don't look anything alike morph in to the other one that smoothly. It just doesn't happen. So anyway, see how wordy I can be? But you have to be.
Well, you just explained why you feel the Black Book is,
Well,
what started you to believing the Black Book.
there's another thing, and there's several other things, but the only other one that comes to mind is years later, okay, 1946, this old duffer named J. Frank Dalton comes forward and says, I'm Jesse James.
Is he 104 years old at this time or something?
It's like 102, I think. Now, I know there's people out there that's going to say, oh, he was just looking for notoriety. Why? Why?
I don't know.
Was he unhappy being J. Frank Dalton? I mean, I get that it's possible that this guy was looking for fame and fortune and whatever and thought he could do it this way. I get it.
Same with
But to me, it's highly unlikely.
I mean, you get the same thing with Billy the Kid. You get, he comes living in Arizona his whole life.
That'd be like me saying, hey, Charles Manson didn't actually go to prison. I'm actually Charles Manson. Okay?
That's a bad example.
Somewhere out there in the audience, there's a couple of people going, maybe he is. So, but during those years, 1946 to 48, there's a series of photographs that are being taken, okay, by news people and everyone trying to get in on the act.
Right.
And in one photo, I mean, it's exploded all over the United States. Here's this man who's claiming he's Jesse James. Could it possibly be him? Blah, blah, blah. By the way, before I forget, and we'll come back to this, you can go to YouTube and type in J. Frank Dalton, and you can watch a video of Jesse James alive on camera. And there's certain little points, if you watch closely, that validates the Black Book story. Okay? We'll come back to that if I don't forget.
I'll write it down. YouTube.
Okay, so anyway, back to the photographs that are being taken of witnesses and people who came forward to say, yes, this is Jesse James. There were people coming from all over the place, hundreds of signed affidavits. In the book, they only tell you about a handful of them or show examples of a handful, but they mention there's hundreds of them. If you ask the academic point of view, there were some affidavits, a few, it's downplayed. Well,
why would they downplay that? I mean,
just by saying there was a few affidavits.
I know. Why would they want to do that? Because they believe the original
Because
story.
they don't want to change the narrative.
The Spanish were never here in Utah.
Huh?
The Spanish were never here in Utah.
Exactly. So Anyway, there's this one photo that shows up. I wish I could remember the other two guys' names, but one of them is John Trammell. John Trammell was an escaped slave. According to the Black Book, Jesse took him on, knowing he was an escaped black slave, okay? Mm-hmm. And he became Jesse James's right-hand man and one of his best friends throughout the remainder of his life. He came, now keep in mind, this is a Confederate and a black man who are friends.
Okay, but
what's wrong with this?
This is the guy that was a fighter.
He was what?
A fighter.
He was a bare knuckle fighter.
Yeah,
the Black Cobra.
The Black Cobra.
And I tried looking that up because I wanted to prove that, but I could never find it. I did find a modern fighter under the name of Black Cobra.
But
I contacted him. He had no idea that this guy ever existed, and he didn't know where the name came from, where he got it from.
But yeah, he was very good at what he did. I understand.
Yeah. Okay, and there has to be something out there to verify that there was a man who existed back in the mid-1800s.
If anybody watching this can verify the Black Cobra, he was present when he was part of the when Jesse got shot.
Well, yes, he was there. He's the one that shot the other two guys out in the barn.
That's right.
Brothers.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy was a freaking hero as far as I'm concerned. He's one of my favorite characters.
So if anybody can figure out a little bit more about the Black Cobra, send me a comment.
The other two black men in the photo were, one of them was a jockey, I can't remember his name, and the other guy, he also rode with Jesse James. They all three did, okay? What are these black men doing riding with a Confederate? Slave owners. Okay, sorry, I'm probably gonna do that 100 times. But the point is here's J. Frank Dalton laying on the table, or laying on hospital bed, and he has his three friends standing behind him. Keep in mind, all three of these men know damn well what this man is claiming. He's claiming to be Jesse James. There's no question that John Trammell knew Jesse James or the other two men.
Correct.
They all knew him.
Are they also 102 years old?
So why are they there in support of this man who's claiming to be Jesse James if they know damn well he's a fraud? Someone please explain that to me. Why are they there?
No, they would be there because they knew he was Jesse James.
Exactly.
Okay.
Which means who didn't get killed in 1882?
These three people, Trammell, they have to be old too. Like 102.
Oh yeah, Trammell, get this. You know, everybody hears that date that, Jesse James lived to be 105. I can't believe that. I can't believe it. Well, guess what? This is a proven fact. Okay. John Trammell, I don't know how old he was at that given time, but when he was 111 years old, I think it was 117, they started doing tests on him to try to figure out how the hell he has lived so long. John Trammell died at age 121.
Wow.
That's a fact. Go look it
That
up.
was the first thing I was thinking about. If they were there supporting Jesse in the hospital bed, they got to be old too.
Oh, they were.
Yeah.
Well, especially the others were younger, okay? But John Trammell, yeah, he was dirt old. And he was in a hell of a lot better condition than some of us.
A lot better than me at the moment.
I'm pretty sure he did his stretches. But no, when you read through the book, John Trammell just works his way under your skin and becomes one of your favorite characters in the book.
Yeah, I don't know my weapons very well because he said that he was very good. He had an over and under.
Yeah. And the gun in that photo you're saying looked like a shotgun to you?
But I was looking it up. Usually an over under is a shotgun and a bullet. So when he was holding the gun this way, I see the shotgun part of it. I don't see the over part of it where it could be a 30-30 or a something.
And you call me handicapped.
I had to look it up. Because if that was his favorite weapon, why was he holding a different weapon?
Yeah. So point being is the question was, what are some of the things that cause you to believe that this hoax, faking Jesse's death, actually happened? Well, that's just a few of them, okay? There's other things that gives credibility, but those are some of the most profound that stuck out to me.
And of course, we're skimming the surface of the book as we're talking about this, because obviously there's points that I'm bringing up that you don't get.
If this topic interests you, if you think you're related to Jesse James, and I'm going to tell people out there right here and now, if you find a tintype on eBay or any other site and you look at it and you go, oh my God, that's Jesse James. Okay, maybe it is. But if you've already made up your mind, don't send it to me and try to get my opinion, because I'm not gonna answer. I'm tired of people sending me pictures who have already made up their mind and they want to hear me say, oh my God, that's Jesse James. It's not gonna happen. Out of all the pictures that's been sent to me in the past roughly 7 years, there's only one that got my attention, and I damn near closed the email and cast it out. And it's because I was so used to looking at pictures that are not Jesse James. Now, those pictures that I said were not Jesse James, I'm saying they were not Jesse Woodson James. They could be Jesse Robert James. We haven't talked about that yet.
Or the other.
One of the confusions that comes up.
Confused, they say.
One of the reasons why things have gotten so confused is people are absolutely convinced that Zerelda Cole James is the mother of Jesse James.
Which he wasn't.
Which is true.
Now wait a minute.
She's not the mother of Jesse Woodson James.
Right.
She is the mother of Jesse Robert James, who is Jesse's cousin, and who was a co-conspirator in all of this. They worked together night and day. They were friends. They were cousins. Now, it gets deeper.
I know.
Jesse Woodson James's brother, who is Sylvester Alexander James, and Jesse Robert James's brother, who is
Sebastian or something Frank.
Alexander Frank James.
Right.
Okay? So here you have cousins, Jesse and Frank, and you got these two cousins over here, sons of Zerelda Cole James.
Couldn't the sisters make up their minds on how to name their kids instead of naming them the same thing?
I don't know. Jesse Woodson James and Sylvester Frank James, their mother was Molly Dalton. She's the woman that's in that picture I told you about that was found on a cabin wall.
With Frank and Jesse at her sides. With Frank and Jesse at her sides.
And then there's the father.
Who isn't in the picture?
George S. Struthers.
Okay.
George Struthers James.
Okay.
They have him being killed in the Civil War in 1862. And I could be wrong, okay? I could be wrong. But I got a picture of him that was taken in 1920, and he's standing next to his wife, Molly Dalton, and not far from them is Myra Bell, and up above her
Who's Myra
is
Bell?
Jesse James. That's Jesse's true love.
Ew.
And he was with her from the beginning. Myra Bell, despite Jesse's other wives, she stuck with him from day one. She did not divorce him. She was never married to a guy named Jim Reed. She was never married to a guy named, no, I can't think of the name. There's another one, Bruce Younger, okay? Bruce Younger and Jim Reed are two of the names that Jesse used as an alias.
None of the prosecutors knew what Jesse looked like. Why would they care?
Anybody that was trying to nail Jesse James, bring him to justice, offering reward posters, etc., they didn't know what he looked like.
Yeah.
None of them.
What was your motive to assess the book?
Well,
I think we talked about that a little bit.
mostly curiosity, but to this day I cannot remember who sent me the damn book. Can I say damn? someone sent me the book and they said, Dan, we would like you to assess this book. And I said, okay, what do you mean assess it? And he said, well, you know, you got a good ability to read between the lines and resolve a mystery, etc. And
I think you do a good job of
course, I didn't
history
pat myself on the back and say, oh, yes, I do. I just said, okay. And I said, what is it you want to know? You know, we want to know if the truth is fact, or if the book is factual, or is it horsepucky? I did it. And so I accepted the book and started reading it, and that's when I realized, you know, holy crap, this is pretty cool.
There's something to it.
If this book is true, then I want to know if it's true. And that struck a curiosity in me, and the more I read it, the more I wanted to know, is this book factual? Because there's some pretty incredible claims in there, and if it is true, then wow, it's a story that needs to be told. But that was the primary motive, just pure curiosity, my need to know.
Because we're getting to the point where we're talking about why you faked it, you know, but we talked about that a little bit already. And
a friend of mine who goes around to old folks' homes and things like that and entertains some of the old people. He has a gimmick that he does. He called me up one day and he said, Dan, he says, there's this little old lady up here in Layton that you need to come talk to her. And I said, why's that? He said, well, she told me that she knew Jesse James. And I says, you mean Jesse James or do you mean Jesse Woodson James? And he says, I don't know. He says, all I can tell is that she was telling stories about Jesse James and Sundance Kid, etc. And I just think you need to come up and talk to her. And I thought about it. I thought, well, it's possible. I mean, she's, you know, she was born obviously back in, I don't know, I think it was the 30s.
So she'd be 10 years old.
You know, she very well could have known him. What's that?
She would have been about 10 years old.
Or younger.
Or younger.
If I recall the events that she gave, she was probably 4 or 5 years old. And anyway, so we set up a time, we went up, sit down and talked to her. Some of the things that she had to say was absolutely freaking incredible. And I went up and talked to one of the workers there that keeps an eye on all these people, and she was kind of bad-mouthing her a little bit, you know, saying, you got to be careful with her. She's got some pretty tall tales and whatever, and it kind of pissed me off. And I turned to the girl and I says, you know what? I said, rather than write her off as a hoax and, you know, telling BS stories and so forth, why don't you give her a little credibility and listen to what she's got to say, because what she's saying may very well be true. And she said, well, I never thought of that. And I said, well, now's a good time. She knew things about Jesse James that I hadn't even read yet in the book. And one of them was, I asked her point blank, I said, now, if I brought you some pictures and I showed you pictures, can you identify what this man looked like that you knew? And what it came down to is that it was a relative of hers. They were somehow related to him. And he would come to visit up in Grover, I think it's Grover, Wyoming, where they used to live. And he would come to visit. And while he would visit there, he would call her up and jump on her. She'd get on his lap and he'd sit and tell her stories about Jesse James. And as she got older, her dad went to her once and says, you remember so-and-so Howard that would come here and visit? She says, yeah, I remember him. He says, you know why he knew so much about Jesse James?
Jesse, where are you going?
And and she said no, and he says, because he was Jesse James.
I think we'll just stop it right there. We're having so much fun. We have a lot more content than we thought we did. So we'll leave this as part 1, and I'll get part 2 going. I want to thank again Greg and his wife for letting us use the Moon Lake Lodge to video this. Also, I'll be putting his information in the description so you can look it up, and I'm not sure how to do these cards and stuff yet, so I'll work on that. One of these days I'll get it done. And it always fails. I got a jet flying over. I really enjoy doing these videos. I'm up to 300 subscribers now, which is really cool. I know it's not a lot for you look at a lot of the YouTube stations, channels are, you know, in the thousands and thousands of subscribers, but you know, I just started this, and it's been really fun, and I'm glad, and I appreciate the subscribers that I do have, and apparently you like watching these videos as well. So I have about 4 more I'm ready to do. It's just actually they're done. I gotta compile them and then get them out to you. But then I do have another appointment out with Dan, so that'll be fun. I think you'll like that one too. So anyway, have a great day, and enjoy part 2. Look for it coming up next couple of days.